Hi everyone, Sat here. So in this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to change the material for the trackable planes and even giving the user some control by having some buttons on there so they can press it to change from hearts, spades, diamonds and clubs. Although the clubs one, I forgot to change the text, but you know, you get the idea. So yeah, and also look, thanks so much for the comments and the likes. It really does help to encourage me to get back and do some YouTube videos. This particular video was because of a request on the course that I do, so thanks for those requests as well. And for those of you who have bought the course, you'll be able to download the full source code there as well. And here's some links for the course on Udemy, as well as Simplev as well, which is another one that I think some of you might have access to if you can't access Udemy. Yeah, so okay, I hope you enjoy this, and good luck. Okay, so what I've done is I have opened up the ARFoundation, the latest one. I've downloaded that and I've just opened up that project. So I've got a bunch of scenes that it comes with, and I'm going to build off of that one. So what I'll probably do is I will use the existing plane detection one, and I'll use the toggle plane detection scene for now. And then I'll just rename it. I'll go to File, Save As, and I'll save this under Scenes as Scene Changer. Oh, not Scene Changer, beg your pardon. I'll change this as Plane Changer. There you go, since we're changing the plane itself. Also, what you want to do is just make sure you go to your build settings, File, Build Settings, and change it from PC, Mac, and Linux to Android if you're building in Android or iOS. And also drag in Plane Changer into here. Otherwise, it's going to be a pain to do that later on when you finally build, because you'll have to convert all the textures and you'll just have to wait for a while, which is kind of annoying. And then we'll look at this script that this comes with. There's already something here called the plane detection controller, and this looks at the plane and it changes it, switches it on and off, which is great. I'm going to add another script to this, and I'm going to call that you've probably guessed what I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it Plane Changer as well. Should I call it Plane Changer, or should I call it Plane? Yeah, I will call it Plane Changer. Okay, so I'll call it AR Plane Changer, and we've got that script now. Hit New Script, Create. And let's go ahead and open this up, and we'll make some adjustments to it. So I'll talk you through what I'm going to do. So at the moment, we've got our regular AR plane manager, right? I mean, you should be familiar with this. If you're not, you can go back to one of the original tutorials that I've done where I break down ARFoundation to its kind of ground level and build it up from scratch. You could also build this scene up from scratch as well, rather than importing it. I just import it for speed, this actual template. So anyway, this AR plane manager, if I click on this AR plane debug visualizer, we have this visualizer here, and I can open the prefab since we're using 2018.3, and it allows us to look at the plane, and it has a mesh collider, it has a mesh renderer, it has a line renderer as well, which you can just see this line here. So if we go to our mesh renderer and we hit the materials one, we can see that we have a material here. And if I click on that material, we can see that it is the plane material here. So this is the material that we have when we place the ground down. So what we want to do is we want to have a situation where we tap a button, for example, and we have a button already because we're using this default scene. In fact, let me change this to something like that. There we go. We have this button here, which when it's clicked, it triggers a function from the plane detection controller. We want to trigger a function as well, but we want it to be on our plane changer. And every time we click that plane changer, what we're going to want to do is change the material of the mesh renderer. And that should then change the material on the ground. It's not going to be quite as easy as that, because there'll be some issues that come up. But let's start off with trying to do that, because that makes sense to all of us. Changing that material of the plane and then continuing to place the new planes via using the regular plane detection. That should solve everything. All right, so I'm also going to change this to standalone. I'm not sure where all of my settings have gone here, but never mind. That will do. All right, so let's open up the AR plane changer script on AR session origin, and let's take a look at what we need to do. So there's a few things we need. We're going to need a list of materials, right? And that's going to have the materials that we want to set. I'll make that public for now, and then we can have a position holder as well. So let's just make that private for now. Don't think we need anything to access that, so let's set it to 0 outside of this script. And then we also need to be able to have access to this plane prefab as well, well, at least the mesh of that. So let's go ahead and do a public mesh renderer, and then we'll call this the current ground plane. And what I'm going to do actually is I'll just show you something. I did, and here I did mesh renderer. And there's a reason why I did mesh renderer and not just renderer, all right? The reason why is if I did renderer, it could work as well, but mesh renderer works better because it specifically targets the mesh renderer. Renderer is a bit more of a generic term. It could be a mesh renderer. It could also be a line renderer that I end up changing. Now I think in this particular case it would probably pick the mesh renderer because that's first. It's the first component. But let's say we will end up, I already know how this tutorial is going to go. I know that we're going to end up having to do something later on, and that could cause problems if we didn't want specific. Of course, now you know how by changing this I could also say line renderer, and we could change the type of color of the line as well. But yeah, we're gonna stick with mesh render because we're gonna specifically change the material on the mesh renderer and not accidentally change the material on the line renderer. So that's a little tip for you going forwards. Okay, so what are we going to do? Well, we want to have a button that presses. Let's keep it simple for now. Let's just have, when a button gets pressed, we want to call a function called nextPlane. And what nextPlane is going to do is that it's going to take the position that we're currently at, and we're going to do position equals position plus 1. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say the current ground plane dot material is equal to the list of materials. We haven't set that yet, but we'll do that. Position in the array, and my Unity has crashed. No, I'm okay. There we go. The position there. So each time the person presses a button, it goes to the next position, and the next plane, the next position of this materials one, and it sets that the current plane on the ground material to that. So at the moment we don't really have a list of materials, so we should probably do that. Let's go ahead and start playing around with that. Let's go back to our AR session origin. So we've got AR plane changer here. We've got a current ground plane mesh renderer, and then we've got the mats. So what is this going to be? Well, this is going to be the AR plane debug here. That's what we're going to be changing. In fact, what I'll do is I'll just hit right click here and I'll hit XR and I will select, I don't think you can see it there, so if I maybe do up here you'll probably see it better. XR, and then let's do AR default plane, right? And then this should be exactly the same as what we were looking at before. And it has a debug, it has a different platform, it has a different element here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this AR default, I'll change the name to changing plane. I'm just doing this because I don't want to mess around with any of these other ones. I think they're fine as they are. So I'll put this here now. I've got changing plane here. I'll delete this. What I'll also do is if I just go back to this one here, it's still referencing that original one, the AR plane debug. So let's check this one for a second. I want to know what where this material is. This material is in the materials folder here, and it's called the plane material one. And I quite like this plane material as a default one. So what I'll also do is I'll go back to prefabs and I'll go to this new one that I've created, the changing plane prefab one. I'll go down to debug plane, and I'll now go back to materials and I'll make sure I've got this plane material in there as well. So now when I have so I know when I put the first plane that I put down, the default one will be plane material. So since that's the case, since the first one that we put on, since the current one that we have selected is this one here with the plane material, what I'm also going to do is go back to my materials array here and make sure that our first one is also the material that we have as default, right? So now our first material here at 0 on the list is the exact same one as the ground, and based off of our code that makes sense. So when the person hits the next plane button, which we haven't created yet, or at least when the person selects this function, the position will change. It will look for this position will be, starts off at 0, it will add 1, so it'll be position 1 now on the materials list, and it will look for the next material. Now at the moment our materials list has only got 1 on there, so that's not going to work. The first position is actually 0, so that will actually throw an error once we look for the next plane. So what we have to do now is add a few more materials here, and we could maybe say let's go for 5 materials, and we'll have the first one again, as like I said, material as 0 as the plane material, and then we want to change these 2, 3, 4 of these ones and have them as different color ones. So I'm going to go ahead and search for some stuff on Google. So I've gone to images, I've gone to labeled for reuse with modification in the tools section of Google Images, and I'm going to use this one for hearts, and then I've decided I'm going to do spades and a club, and what's the last one? Diamonds, right? There you go. So I'm going to search those and I'm going to find some ones to use, and then I'm going to also create I'll put it in the textures folder. So I'm going to go do that now. Okay, so I've done that now. I've got my clubs here, my diamonds, my hearts, and my spades. Now, the texture type is set as default. If it was set to sprite 2D, and if I hit apply, you'd be able to see the image more clearly. But it's not actually a sprite. It's going to be on the ground or as part of a material. So we don't really want to change that. We want to just make sure it's the same as the other material, the other textures that are used on ARFoundation So they have it set as default. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to leave it as default, and the material should take care of the transparency later on. So what we want to do is just make sure that the wrap mode is also repeat, so it repeats on the ground, and that is the only thing that's done as default. And we can also change down the max size if we wanted to. There's something like 1000 or even 512. So this is on the ground. It's not, doesn't really need to be that high, but I'm going to leave it as that anyway. It doesn't really bother me too much. Okay, so now we've done that, we need some materials. We've got this plain material here, which is the one that's the default one that we're using. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate this by doing Command and D. And I've got that here, and I'm going to change this now to hearts material. I'm going to delete that extra one. And I'm going to now go to the albedo and select hearts. And now you can see that our hearts are there because of the image. I don't think we really need to play too much around with this. I'm going to leave it as it was, which is 186. That's fine. I think that's okay. So let's we've got our plain one, we've got a hearts one. Let's keep on going and do the rest. So hearts material, club, hearts club. Let's change this as well and select clubs. Now the pattern I used for clubs and hearts is based off what I could find online. So if you are a designer, a 2D artist, then you can probably knock something out depending on what your game. If it's grass or whatever, then that's fine. You could do something like that. But this is interesting for me and for you, I guess, to just see the difference in patterns on the actual ground. So let's just keep going, even though the patterns are different. So let's go to spade now, and I'll just get rid of that extra one as well. Don't have to really, but I'm going to do it anyway. And select spade. Can't see it, so I'll just search for it. There we go, spades. And see if that looks like, yep, that's fine. And let's duplicate this again and change this to the last one, which is diamonds. So if we were making a card game, for example, this would be quite useful. So let's change this to diamonds now. Right, there we go. So the diamonds one didn't come out great because we've got this the yellow there. So I wonder what we can do here to fix that. We can change this to red instead, actually. I guess that would probably be the better way, since diamonds are more red. And this isn't an alpha. The texture that I'm using is a PNG for the diamonds that I found, rather than a PNG with any transparency. It's got no transparency, actually. So this is something to note. If the other images that I had, the other textures that I found, you'll notice this is a PNG. This is a PNG, and they have transparency. Although it's black here, this is actually alpha. It just looks like it's black when we're looking at it here, but it's actually alpha. This one is actually white, which is why it turned that white into more of a yellow looking one. So it'd just be interesting to see. Now we won't be able to see what's beneath the ground on diamonds, and to kind of fix that to some degree, we can kind of do this, but it's not going to look great. But let's go ahead and leave that though, just so we can see what it looks like on the device when we're testing it out anyway. Okay, so we've got these. So again, just to reiterate, you'd want it to be the texture to be a PNG, and you'd want the parts that are not, you don't want people to see it to be have an alpha of them, and the PNG will keep the transparency, whereas something like a JPEG loses that transparency, which is why we get that issue. But we'll be able to see that anyway, and we'll leave that in. So we've got our materials now. So let's go ahead and add those in. So we've got a plain material. Let's go to materials. Let's select the hearts one maybe first, and then let's go for the clubs one after that, and then let's go for spades, and then last but not least the diamonds, the one that will look a little bit funky. And then the current ground plane is the mesh that we're going to be changing, right, when we have once the next plane function is called. So that is going to swap that material on that particular mesh with the one of these new ones, depending on which position number we're at. So that is going to have to be linked to the changing plane prefab, right? It's gonna, you can see that symbol there is the same symbol as the mesh renderer that we have on here, right? Because we're only looking for a mesh renderer. So it will take that mesh renderer and change the material on there. All right, so that makes sense. We're going to have some problems though. You might have already realized that this keeps on, every time next plane is called, it keeps adding 1 to the position, and that's going to work great up until we hit 5, and then it's going to be looking for position 6, and there is no position 6, so it's going to call an error. So to fix that, what we want to do is we want to just have an if statement that says if position is more than or equal to mats.length, then we want to do position is equal to 0. So when anyone presses, and we haven't done this yet, but what we'll do is we'll set up a button, and when that person presses that button, it will call next plane, and next plane will then call this script, and this script will change pos, which is equal to 0 at the moment, and add 1 to it. So the first time someone presses it, it will equal 1, so it will use hearts. Second time it will call 2, it will do clubs. Third time, and then the fourth time it will be diamonds. And then on the 5th time that person presses the button, the position will equal 5. So it will say if position is more than or equal to mats.length, which it does now because it's equal to 5, it will reset position and it will set it back to 0, which means the current ground plane material will now be at mats position 0. So go right back again to 0. And then again, when they press it, it'll be position will equal 1, so it'll be the hearts material, and so on. We'll just keep going round and round like this. So that should just fix that for us. Actually, I could have just done is equal to, but I did more than or equal to, just in case some random thing happens and you end up having position is equal to like 7, for example, in some weird, strange way. You never know. It's very unlikely. In fact, based off of this code, it's never going to happen. But I just did it as a bit of a safety check, really. So anyway, that's fine. That should work now. So what are we going to do now? We need to actually have a button, right, that calls next plane. So we've got, if we look at our normal UI here from the original script that we've got this button up here. I think I'm on the wrong side of it. There you go. And we could just use this button, really. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the, well, I'll just duplicate the button. That's what I'll do. I'll duplicate this button, and then I'll hide the original one. So now we've just got this button here, and I'll do this to change plane instead. This button is now change plane, and its text is also gonna need to change. So let's go ahead and change this to next change the plane. And now we can fix the UI and the buttons later, but for now let's just get to this point where we can test this code. So what are we gonna do now? So we've got this button here, and originally it called plane detection controller, which was up here. We don't want it to call that now. We want it to call AR plane script. So if we go back to that button, we can see that this button has a button script on it, and it has an on-click function here, or event. And what that does is it calls the plane detection controller toggle script here, and it's calling it because this reference here is this AR session origin here, which gives it access. Gives this access to any script that is also on this AR session game object. So now I can call any script from here. So if I go back to change plane button, in fact what I'll do is I'll just put the letters BTN on here, so when I look down there I can see that here as well. So if I go to this now, what I should be able to do is click on here and go and see plane detection controller, which it was before, and I can also see AR plane changer, that script that we've made, and I should be able to see that function that we've created in here called next plane. So now I can select this, and what that is doing is going to call, it's going to look at this game object here, and it's going to find AR plane changer script. It's going to go inside of it, and it's going to call next plane here, like that. So I hope that makes sense. So we're just changing the material on the changing plane prefab, the planes that the AR plane manager is using. Now I actually just realized it's not using, I thought I changed it but I didn't. So what we're going to do here is using the default AR plane debug one. We actually want to swap it with the one that we created ourselves earlier on. So let's change that there. So now every time the AR plane manager finds a potential ground flat surface, it will put on our changing planes prefab that we had, our plane, and then our script will change the material of that every time we press a button, which is great. But it's not perfect. There will be a bug with this, an issue with this. So have a think about what's not going to work and what will work with this. And I will build this to phone, and I'll show you what works and what doesn't work. And I'll also, afterwards, I'll show you how we can fix that. Okay, so I've scanned the ground, and I'm going to press the change the plane button. And you'll notice that it hasn't changed the plane. But if I turn around over here, and I start tracking the floor, you'll notice it has. So the new ground that gets put down does change. But when they, so it's lost tracking because of I'm recording at the same time. But when they connect, something odd's gonna happen. It replaced the new one with the older one. So when the original plane that was put down touches the new one, it changes it to the original one because it's expanding out and it's kind of engulfing it. But if I press that button again, and I place it, let's say, on the table, so a higher surface where it's not going to touch, you can see I've got the spade one, and I can press it again, and I should have the diamond one now. If I move it, let's say, on a flat surface here. Oh no, it's probably the club one. No, that was a club one. That's the spade one, and then I can maybe put diamond. Oh, there you go, diamonds on the wall, right? So it is working to some degree, but it's not working. It's putting different ones down, and we don't actually want that. We want to be able to change all of the ground at the same time, and that's actually not right. It is changing it, but it's only changing for the new ones. And as soon as the old floor touches the new one, it changes it. And in this case, since they're on different surfaces, that's not going to be too much of an issue, but it is an issue that they're different. So let's see if we can fix that and change that now. So let's try and understand this a little bit more. Our code is changing the ground plane, but it's changing it for the prefab that we're placing down on the ground. So every new prefab we place down, for every new trackable ground, will have that prefab with the new material based off of the mats materials array. However, the previous prefabs that have already been placed down on the floor, those are not being changed, right? So we need to figure out a way how to go through all of those trackables and just change them all rather than just the new one. We also want to change the new one too, so this is actually fine because we want to change the new ones that are found, new trackable planes, but we also want to change the old ones as well. So I have got this little screenshot here. Now if we look at this screenshot, it shows that it's from the another tutorial I did for ARFoundation remote devices one. So the last free tutorial that I did. And on that, you can see that we've got trackables here. And this is where all the trackables, the new ones, go while the device is, while it's live anyway. We don't see this in the editor. We only see this on device. So what we can do now is, while this app is running, is we can go through those trackables using something like get component in children and of the on the parent of those, and we can then just update all of the materials on all of those as well. So we know based off of that image that I showed you that the trackables is going to be a child of this one, and since that is, we got our plane manager script on that, what we can do is we can now in here we can actually go ahead and just search for the mesh renderers of there. So we can go and write something like mesh renderer, and we can create an array because there'll be loads of trackables, possibly anyway, loads of trackables that we want to keep track of, loads of planes. So rens is equal to transform dot get components in children, and that's going to look for all the components in the children that have a mesh renderer. And then once we've got that, we can do a for loop and say for go through that, each one of those until you hit the length of it, and change the material and set that as well. So actually we want to set that to the same as this. So that should change all the renderers for that have already been placed for the trackable fields, and they will be the exact same as the current one that is being placed as well. So now this should technically fix the issue that we had, and we can give this a save and try this as well, and that should solve our issue. And now we can change it by hitting the next button on there. Okay, so we've got this. Let's change this a little bit more now, and let's take this a little further. Let's say we've got 4 buttons, well 5 buttons actually, because we'll leave this one and we'll have it so that the person can just choose what they want to do, what they want to put down. So they could put like a heart down, or you know, whatever they want really. And then on this canvas, I believe I can add in a vertical layout group to this, just to make that a little bit more tidy, and that's fine. So we've got this first one. This will just automatically add 1 to the position, which is fine. And then we also want to now change these, add something actually to this, change it. So instead of it's just change, it will change it to something. So we can say change well, we don't even need the word change here. We can just say hearts here, and then let's also change the text, say hearts, so the user knows what they're. But maybe we can do change to hearts here. Oh, I won't. You can. I'll let you decide what you want the user to do. I'll just change the hearts here like that, and then for here I'll also do, say, clubs, and then clubs here. And actually what I probably should do is make sure these are in the same order, in the correct order, but I'll look at it afterwards. Right now I'll just set these up first, just to say it. So all these do is it says spades, hearts, and whatever, but actually it doesn't do anything. If we press any of these buttons, it would still do the exact same as the first button, because all we're doing is really changing the text on them. Hearts, clubs, spades, and diamonds. So let's change that as well. All right, so we've got these now, and I'm gonna just check the AR session origin and just see what the order is. So hearts, and then clubs, and then spade, and oh, okay, so I happen to do it in the exact right order as well, which is handy. Now I could have another one here for default, but I will leave that one out. I'll just leave the default one out. All right, so we've got these buttons here. So I'm going to add in another code here, a plane changer one, for exactly the same as this. No, not exactly the same. It will be something like public void set plane set maybe pos 2, and then what it will do is it will set position, and it will take an int called new pos, and then it will set position is equal to new pos, like so, and then it will do all of this code. So what we can do then in that case is get rid of it here and put it here, right? And then since this is doing the same code, we can just call this code here as well, pause, and call pause in there. Oh no, it won't do that because it's adding position to it already. So position is equal to new position. Oh, that would work as well. Position equals equal to new position. Although you're changing position here, you're not actually setting it, so it could work. That does work actually. Okay, yeah, so that should work anyway. And then you set the position. So actually, so this means that now we can call set position 2 with a new variable here, and that will set it here. So now what we can do is on these buttons, hearts, clubs, spade, we can do another piece of code here. Instead of having it call next plane, we'll actually call it specifically to hearts or whatever. So we know that hearts is the first one. So we can call AR plane changer. Did I save this? Set position 2. I didn't see it. Set position 2. Here we go. And this will be now 1, because that is the number for hearts. And the same we can do for clubs, except it's going to be 2. And then set for spades 3, and set position here again, and that's going to be 4. So now we can set the exact material we want based off of what the user presses on the button, and we've even got one that can just change it to the next one automatically while they're clicking through. So why don't we save this and actually run it and see what it looks like on the device. Okay, so we put that down. If I hit the hearts button, it changes the hearts. If I move away and I change the plane again, I didn't change that to say clubs. I should have. I thought I did, but I didn't. But the rest of them say it, so that's fine. You get the point. So if I turn around now, it should also be clubs on the floor, which is good. So that worked. Let's try and change it to spades. Automatically change diamonds, and if I hit the change the plane button, it should go to the regular default one. Brilliant. So now we've got it working. Let's try putting something on the table. Good. And changing it to spades. And putting something on the bed. Brilliant. So we've got it so that it works for every single one of them. And we can change it as we like. So I hope that helps. And change the plane button's working as well. I can just keep tapping on that and it automatically changes it. So I hope that helps you learn how to do the differences, how to change the material on the planes based off of buttons, and you can probably make some really cool, interesting apps, AR, augmented reality apps based off of just that alone as a kind of a feature to make things a little bit more cool. All right, I hope that helps.